I've mentioned it a couple times in a few videos, but I've never really gone in depth about it. So I'll be doing that in this video. So let's get started. So here are the characteristics of borderline personality disorder, okay? Unstable relationships, intense, tumultuous relationships with frequent breakups and reconnections, emotional dysregulation, extreme mood swings, anger and impulsivity, identity disturbance, unclear or shifting sense of self, values, and goals. Impulsivity, engaging in reckless, self-destructive behaviors. Self-harm, reoccurring suicidal thoughts, attempts, or suicidal self-injury, or non-suicidal self-injury. Dissociation, feeling disconnected from oneself or reality. Fear of abandonment, intense anxiety or anger when faced with real or perceived abandonment. So there you go. Here's another fact. BPD affects approximately 1.6 of the U.S. population, with women more likely to be diagnosed than men. While it's often stigmatized, BPD is a treatable condition, and individuals can learn to manage symptoms and improve their quality of life with the usual therapy, medication, blah 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 blah. So first, let's touch down on the unstable relationships aspect. So this can look different in a lot of ways. And this is relationships, so that doesn't mean just like romantic, but platonic and just any kind of relationship you might have with someone, and even some things. It can be very, unstable. And a lot of that has to do with sort of where your mind at in terms of where that relationship is. Like, say you have a friend and, that's your best friend, right? But then, you start to think about maybe you're not the best friend. And so sometimes you put too much valuation into a relationship that might actually be pretty insignificant to the other person. Like, I had a friend that I had in high school, and we stayed in touch for a long time, but like, I kept considering him like a really close friend of mine, but then we would lose touch for a very long time, and then out of nowhere he would kind of like pop back up, and then it was kind of like I noticed like the pattern, like you only seem to really talk to me when this one thing happens, like literally every single time. And this is so weird because like I would reach out and then it wasn't like reciprocated, and so then that kind of made me feel like, well, why do I care so much? Why does this friendship matter to me so much? It took me a long time to realize that like the friendship from them became like a generic thing long time ago, you know what I mean? Like that one person at school who you were cool with in high school and you kind of hung out with, but then you graduated and you never really talked again, and you never really cared. That's kind of like how it was for him, whereas for me it was like I love that guy, like he's one of my best friends, I remember this and this and that and blah 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 blah, but that's me, and that's just me. And with borderline personality disorder, that type of sequence can happen in a lot of ways, but that also kind of ties into that other one where it talks about like the fear of abandonment. So you're worried that that friendship isn't what you think it might be, and in that case it wasn't. But that type of situation is kind of horrifying to think about, like not mattering, but then you always kind of feel like maybe you don't matter so much anyways. So when you, so in your relationships with people, you tend to not really intentionally, but you kind of end up sabotaging them because you become too clingy or you become too distant. You know what I mean? It's like I gotta distance myself from this person, and they don't have any clue that like how intense you're feeling about that relationship, right? So, like I found situations where it was like, I had a friend a couple years ago who there's this thing with BBD called like favorite person, and I mean it's just that like when you have BBD, like you'll single out one person and they'll become like the epitome of everything for you. And with BPD, sometimes that person can be very insignificant. You might not have even known them for very long, or you could have known them your whole life, but you know, it's very intense for you regardless of which end of the spectrum that is on. But this person means way too much to you. And, you know, the kind of sort of obsession that comes with that ends up hurting you because it's just like you have really unrealistic expectations, and you know you kind of want to be like the center of attention to this person, and you do. Yeah, it's just this aspect is hard to explain without seeming totally crazy, but I guess you know. So yeah, and a lot of times people find it hard to maintain relationships with people who have BPD. So like people who don't have it, because it can be very intense, especially like in the romantic sense. Those tend to be like the most volatile, but not always. But like I said, it can occur in just regular platonic relationships, within family, within just anything really. At this very moment, I don't have a favorite person. Do I? No, I did probably a couple years ago, and that was bad for me. It was really bad for me, and I finally faced reality on that situation and was able to kind of give myself closure and just move on and realize, you know, this is definitely the BPD. Sometimes you aren't really aware of that, you know what I mean? Like you don't even realize that you've made someone your favorite person, your FP, until you recognize way down the line how like crazy you've been, you know what I mean? Like say you'll be looking at like your messages and you're like, well why was that exchange so strange? And then you're looking at it and you're like, you start looking at like the whole line and you're like, oh, okay, so I'm the problem. Awesome. So anyways, and that fear of abandonment leads to like insecurities, and you know insecurities lead to all other kinds of things. But when you have BPD, why is my hair so like what's going on back here? I feel like every time I move like I said, you feel things like intensely, so nothing is really a small deal, you know what I mean? Like everything is basically a big deal. So like just getting into an argument with someone you're close to, that could seem like the end of the world, you know what I mean? Like it could just be a regular, you know, argument that you have in any regular day situation, and you move on from it and you not care. But with someone for PPD, that could be like, that could completely change their worldview, you know what I mean? They could go from being totally fine into suddenly being in like manic depressive, you know what I mean? Like it's that serious sometimes for them, you know what I mean? But in the grand scheme of it all, it's teeny, you know what I mean? So imagine when it actually is something big, the way we might react, you know what I mean? And you know, the emotional sort of dysregulation aspect of BPD shows up probably most often at these times, but at least for us to notice it. I know for me, like with my emotional dysregulation, it I kind of notice it more and more when I react to certain things, and especially when it comes to like irritability, or like what makes me happy or what makes me sad, and how quickly that can happen. How something can totally ruin my day, or how intensely I'll respond to something. Like if I'm upset about it, and how little that thing can be. But I feel like, like someone just like came up to me and like spit in my face. But it could have been something as simple as like a greeting, right? So say you're somewhere or even at home or something, and someone doesn't say like good morning or hello to you, right? And it could have just slipped their mind, but you registered that, like, and it's there. And your emotional response to that is profound. You know what I mean? And they might not necessarily know. In fact, they probably don't, because you're not gonna mention anything. But you're gonna feel the way you feel. Probably for the rest of that day, over analyzing it until something probably equally as like irrelevant kind of makes it go away. Like suddenly, that person's talking to you at lunch. You know what I mean? And then it's like, oh, so maybe I was overreacting earlier. Thank God I didn't react like the way I was feeling. You know what I mean? Like thank gosh I didn't have the chance to be passive aggressive because I was already there, or just to seem weird and clingy and just all kinds of things, right? But like I react very strongly to negative things, and of like all levels. I mentioned in another video how like sometimes the littlest thing can feel like mountains for me, and like sometimes little things might give you anxiety, like normal regular things, but for me, really mundane things can give me anxiety. But then they'll give it to me so intensely. It's like I should not feel this strongly about this thing. You know what I mean? Negatively, I shouldn't be this like emotionally volatile over this, over having to do this, or having to say that, or over this little sequence of events. When you have BPD, a lot of the times and I mentioned this also in another video about sort of over analyzing what people say to me, and that could be the paranoia aspect of it, and also the maybe fear of abandonment. I don't know, but yeah, the over like you tend to kind of to read between the lines a little too much, and you're looking for you're looking for the thing in there that's hinting that this person hates your guts, basically, and if you look hard enough for the problem that doesn't exist, you'll find it. You know what I mean? Even if you've made it yourself, and then that of course causes its own problems, because now all of a sudden you're switching up. You know what I mean? You're like your behavior towards this person is changing because of your perception of this, right? And they don't know any of this is going on, right? Even people who know you have BPD, they still don't tend to put two and two together. In fact, I found that most people, if they remember you have it, they just lump it in with like being crazy, because of just the name alone, or they they don't remember it at all, or they don't consider it whatsoever. So again, you're just being crazy. You know what I mean? There's no means to the madness, and even with BPD, there really isn't no means to the madness. But the madness is the BPD itself sometimes. So let's talk about those intense mood swings. That's probably one of my bigger issues with BPD, is I go through those And that's probably, I would say that's probably the worst aspect of it for me, because it happened so suddenly, and then it can also just as suddenly become something else, right? So, like, say a normal situation for me is like, I'm doing okay. I wake up and I'm fine, and I'm like, it's totally fine. And then maybe for no reason at all, it switches. You know what I mean? And I'm feeling like the complete opposite of that. You know what I mean? This is the worst day ever. I don't even want to get out of bed. I don't want to. I don't want to go outside. I don't want to do anything. Like I hate everything right now. Like literally, this is the worst day of my life ever. And like literally 60 seconds ago, I was like walking on sunshine. And it's bad when people notice this. Like anytime I've been hanging out with friends, they'll be like, "Are you mad?" Because I'll suddenly become quiet, and I will just have like kind of turned off almost, and that's really kind of my way of making sure I don't be crazy, making sure I don't overreact to things, or you know, I just kind of become quiet. You know what I mean? Like there's like just at least when I'm around other people and I notice the shift, but they tend to notice it too, because I become very quiet. You know what I mean? I guess I'm more animated than I realize. Even though I watch these videos back and I see that I move a lot when I talk and my head's going all over the place. So it's pretty polarizing when I'm suddenly quiet, I guess. And so, but I will be quiet, and I'll be like really intently into something, and I'll give like short responses, and people will think that I'm like upset or angry at them specifically, when really I'm just kind of like emotionally deflated. And I'm trying to like get back to normal. You know what I mean? Some of that is like, the social anxiety aspect of it. Sometimes I can be in a very crowded situation and be fine, and then suddenly not be fine, or I can be somewhere and be enjoying myself like with friends or something, and then suddenly I need to be away from them, like desperately I need to like leave, and it just happens so suddenly that it doesn't really correlate to anything. You know what I mean? It's like we were all just playing poker and having a good time, and so what just happened? Like what just happened? I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. Troubles with your identity is another issue with borderline personality disorder, and that's definitely one that I do and have dealt with. But just kind of feeling like, especially lately, and I know if I actually mentioned this. Did I mention this in therapy? I definitely did. I mean, I don't know how recent it was, but I've mentioned it over the years, just kind of feeling like I'm not sure who I am. Like I don't know who I am anymore, or I don't know if I've been me since X amount of time ago, or if I can't be me until X time, right? And that is very interesting because that makes it really easy to sometimes look at other people and sort of kind of take bits and pieces of those aspects of them that you like and kind of incorporate it a bit into you, sort of in a subconscious way. Like I noticed a while back that like a friend of mine, as a person, they can be not that great and just very not standoffish, but just very dry, and a lot of gaslighting, a lot of dismissing of things. Anyways, I noticed myself taking on some of those traits. You know what I mean? I remember responding to somebody once, and I was like, later on, reflecting, like, Like, why did I react like that? That was almost just like this. And I think I had to look it up, because there is a certain, like, there is a certain normalcy in when you are around someone so much and adapting some of their patterns. That's kind of normal, but it can also happen with bad things. But with BBD, you don't always have to know that person. I noticed years ago that I took on characteristics of a character from a TV show I really like, and now it's a genuine part of how I am now. But it was kind of crazy to really notice that after the fact. The series ended a long time ago, but I like one of the characters a lot, just their general attitude, and I kind of picked up some of their isms, you know what I mean? Sort of their like trademark things, or their way of saying certain things, the way of moving their head. I kind of noticed that a lot with me. And that might also play into like, who am I? And like, looking back, like, I do remember feeling like I was me at some point. And it's not like, I mean, it might sound crazy in this video, like I don't know who I am, but it's not like that, but also it kind of is. Like, I don't know. Am I getting anywhere with this? Am I saying anything? I don't know. When I first started doing ASMR, when I first started doing ASMR, like ever, years ago, I was really inspired by ASMR the Jew. And she does like mukbangs and ASMR, and I mean, she does pretty much everything, but that's like what I found her doing. I don't think she does it very much anymore, but that was like the thing, and I liked the way she talked, and I liked just the atmosphere. So when I started mine, I was kind of more like her in a certain sense. I was even doing mukbangs, and I did a couple, and I kind of felt like, looking back, at a certain point, I kind of moved on from that. But like, I've been kind of converting some of my old videos into shorts, and when I look at them now, I'm like, what? Like, I mean, I've mentioned it before since I've started doing them again this year, that I feel like I'm more me now. And that becomes more and more evident when I look back at before, because I seem so guarded. Like, to me, like, I see it. I don't know if you'd be able to see it, but I see it. I can see it in the way that I talk, in the way that I sound, in the way that I move. I don't know. It doesn't feel authentic, but I know I wanted to be doing it. So I don't know. Where was I going with that? I think we were talking about identity. Are we still on that? Are we still on identity? We might need to move on. Again, chronic feelings of emptiness. And, that can kind of go hand in hand with the, identity issues. But it's on a much different level. Like, for me, that emptiness lately has sort of been kind of existential. You know what I mean? It's like, ever since it hasn't been since then, but it just kind of became very persistent since my aunt died last year. Where I'm kind of like, well, what is the point of everything? Like, why are we alive just to kind of watch people we love die? You know what I mean? To just suddenly be gone. Like, what? Then what? You know what I mean? So then you go down this rabbit hole of religion and like evolution philosophies, and you're kind of like, what does it mean? Like, and then there's the horrifying reality to me that, some people think that there's just no point to anything. And that's sort of where my existential dread comes from. It's like, well, if this doesn't mean anything, then why even bother? And it's like, because it's like, will I ever see my aunt again? And if I died, would I ever see my mom again? You know what I mean? Like, would I see these people again in some form? Or is that it? Is that just it? You know what I mean? Like, it's, you start over. Like, I don't like that idea whatsoever. But then there's also like the idea of heaven, and that concept to me is also kind of hard to place, because I don't understand the interpretations that I've heard. I can't, because I'm a very visual thinker. So even like as I'm talking, I tend to have images in my head playing. You know what I mean? I guess we'll talk about maladaptive daydreaming in another video, because that's really what I deal with on a constant basis. I guess you could call it maladaptive reality at this point. Anyways, what was I talking about? Oh, emptiness and all that stuff. So, yeah, and so it's like, well, where am I at? I remember a couple years ago, I was trying to find where I might align in terms of like spirituality and all of that stuff. And I remember at that time I was reading a book called, what the heck was that book called? It was a really big deal at some point. It was like the something, it has that like red wax stamp on it from like an old timey letter. The something, the plan, the site, I can't remember, but it was a really big deal. Maybe you know what I'm talking about. I'll put it up on the screen if I can't remember it. So it's probably on the screen right now. Okay, it's this book. Okay, the what? I almost have it, but anyway, it's this book and its idea. Actually, it's been so long since I read this book that I can't even really remember what it was, but I remember the part of the book that made me stop reading it completely, because it was like, it was saying that like bad things that happen are because of the negative energy from the things that it's happening to. And I think it referenced like the atrocities that have happened in the past, and it was kind of like basically saying it was their fault. And it didn't sit right with me. And a lot of it was there for a while until it hit that point. And then I was like, I don't know if this, it was just a no for me. But, that was one aspect. My brother became like, I found again, born again. I wouldn't say born again, but anyways, he became super invested into, actually, I can't even say it was Christianity. I guess it's just God. Of course, he was in prison when he found God, for the upteenth time. But this time it actually stuck, and he really did change his life around. It's almost poetic, because I'll probably make a video on him one day, because that's a really loaded topic. But needless to say, years ago, I want to say maybe 5 years ago or so, he got out of prison. And every time someone who's been in prison for a little while, and while they're in prison, you hear about how they're going to change, and how they found God, and how things are going to be different, and then they never are. But this time it was, and it's stuck. And his faith has been very, very strong, and that's kind of been his driving motivator. And it's admirable. but then it becomes very imposing sometimes, and that's what tends to turn me away. I don't know. Where was I going with that? But anyways, like he gets a lot of his fulfillment through his higher. He gets a lot of his fulfillment through having a higher power and having meaning behind that. You know what I mean? And I'm always thinking, if I were religious, or at least had an idea of a. So here's the thing. I don't know where I'm at on the spectrum of belief, but I'd like to believe that there's something bigger than this, than me, and the world. Like, there's something, you know what I mean? I would like to believe that it didn't just happen, but that's still a reality that is plausible in my head. That any possibility is a possibility, and some of them are more unfortunate than others. You know what I mean? Like the idea of happenstance. You know what I mean? Of it all just, of being pointless and meaningless. And sometimes I'm like, wow, and people have thought, people have assumed that I'm an atheist, and I don't consider myself an atheist because I am open to the idea of a higher power, of a god or a deity or a celestial being. I'm open to the idea, you know what I mean? I haven't completely rejected it, but I have rejected certain interpretations of it. But it's like, I think with atheism, it's like, there just is no meaning. You know what I mean? There's no purpose. It's just we're here and that's it. And you know what I mean? Like, my mindset is that, so if there's no point in any of this, then why bother? You know what I mean? To me, it's like things can be really rough for certain people, and it's like, well, why should they stick around? You know what I mean? If they don't want to stick around, you know what I mean? And that goes into, I guess, sort of the suicidal aspect of BPD and those thoughts that kind of pop up, along with all these other things you got going on. But like with the emptiness, those suicidal thoughts can really come up pretty strong, especially like the existential aspect. You know what I mean? Anytime I start getting really existential, I know I'm heading in a bad place, because it always kind of leads to the same place of, what's the point? You know what I mean? Like, what's the point, and where are certain people? Like, where's my aunt right now? You know what I mean? Like, is she where she wants to be? My aunt was very religious also. She went to church every Sunday. She was very active in her choir, and she really loved life. And so when she passed, it was really hard on me, because we were very close, and it was unexpected, and it felt very unfair because she had so many plans. She's in her 60s, and I think late 60s at the time, and she had so many plans, and it was just kind of ironic to me, because it's like she was really living life and looking forward to life, and that could not be said about me. And it's like, now she's gone and I'm still here, and it's like, why is that? Why is it that way? I had a very volatile year one year where I was basically constantly on watch. My reasons for sticking around were slowly dwindling, or the significance of it. You know what I mean? It's like, well, yes, it would suck for you, but also, like, isn't it kind of selfish for me to want me to stick around just for you? You know what I mean? Anyways, like, that's kind of how your mind works with PPD and the suicidal aspect of it sometimes. I mean, like I said, this is just my experience. I've actually not met anybody else who has this. So I can't really, exchange experiences with anybody. I am on like a Reddit sub of people who have PPD, but I find that a lot of a lot of them are self-diagnosed, which, there's a problem in that in itself. And because of that, of their self-diagnosis, they tend to there's a certain romanticization of certain aspects of BPD that I keep seeing pop up, and it's like, well, okay, yes, that's an aspect of it, but where's all of these other ones that no one's ever talking about on there? You know what I mean? So it's, I don't interact with it because I just kind of look at it sometimes, and anyways, where was I going with that? BPD, and people in my experience, and suicidal thoughts, and I'll probably make a video on suicidal thoughts in itself because I just don't have time to touch down on the significance of that and where my particular mind is on that, where it's been and where it's at the moment, because it's a very big topic. We're almost at an hour now, and that topic would easily be an hour-long discussion, and a very serious one, and I think it's a serious topic that needs to be discussed more openly, because I don't know, it's like every time something happens in that realm, people seem so shocked. And it's like, well, you can't really talk about it, you know what I mean, if you're having those thoughts, because it's people, you know. I remember I told a friend once, and he was literally mad. He was like, that's stupid. He literally said, like, it was stupid, but it wasn't in that way. It was like he was emotional, like he was, like he, you know what I mean, like he didn't really know how to articulate, like how he felt about it, but it was just kind of funny, like, you know, internally I thought it was kind of funny, like, oh, yeah, it really is kind of stupid, yeah, but it was like, you know, you shouldn't be this way, like, well, you know what I mean, here we go, yeah, we're moving on now, okay. And actually, if I can just rewind a bit, I don't know how far back we were talking about, like, the sense of self and, like, our identity, but that also factors in with, like, body image, right? So, you know, the other day I had this, you know what, maybe body image will be out of another video too. If you have BPD, I apologize for being a really poor representation in this video, but you know how it is, you know what I'm saying? So cut me some slack. And if you don't have it, maybe you can understand it a bit better, you know what I mean? If you know somebody who has it, and or you've been told offhand about that person, and you mostly hear negative things about them, maybe think, okay, you know, you just thought maybe they were an awful person, because, you know, people with BPD are stigmatized a great deal, because anytime you mention personality disorder, people kind of go to the worst right away, and they start thinking like that you have like 15 personalities and stuff like that, which anyways, but you know, one of the big things was that, you know, therapy is a big part of like controlling BPD, right? It's not curable, it is treatable. But it turns out that because as patients, people with BPD are very hard to manage and to really succeed with, that a lot of therapists do not take clients who have BPD. That's just a sad reality, but it can be much harder to get into therapy and like psychiatry when you have BPD because of the workload you're going to give to the people who are overseeing like your situation. So, you know, I got lucky, I guess. Where was I going with that? I don't. So, anyways, there's a theory that BPD is triggered by like a childhood trauma. I definitely dealt with some things when I was a kid that would certainly have triggered such a thing. And honestly, it probably did, because looking back, I was pretty all over the place, even as a kid. I was way too emotional and intense as like a 10 or 11-year-old, you know. I was already self-harming back then, you know what I mean? serious. I was just like cutting myself, you know what I mean? But it was, and I didn't, like, no one knew that I ever did that until I was an adult. Until I said something like, oh yeah, I used to cut myself all the time. When I get mad at myself, I'd be like, I'm gonna make you pay, you know what I mean? Anyways, and then I would feel really bad about it, you know what I mean? I would feel bad for my skin, you know what I mean? I'd be like, I'm so sorry that I did this to you, you know what I mean? Like, it was a whole different entity, yeah. Anyways, but it's been present a long time, just like my ADHD has. But they weren't caught until I was an adult. Because when I was younger, they just thought I was really, really bad. So they would kick me out of schools and throw me into all these programs. And really, the issue was mostly the schools. Because once I got switched to a certain school, like, my whole life basically changed. Because I guess they gave it crap, you know what I mean? They were teachers who wanted to teach and to expand, and, you know, they were the sort of stereotypical, idealized teacher, and that was what they set out to do, and they did, you know what I mean? So they turned my life around. Because I was a late bloomer, educationally speaking. Like, I could not read or write up until like the 5th grade. So, and that's crazy. So how do you get to 5th grade? And I mean, I could write to a certain degree, but reading was a no. But how do you get that far along? And, you know, you can't read, you know what I mean? So how do you know what I mean? How do you pass? How do you get that far? How does that happen? So, clearly the system was failing me there for a while. And it's so weird because they didn't really send me home with notes. So my mom didn't really know. You know, I guess it never really became relevant. Because I could recognize certain words. You know what I mean? So it could appear as though I was reading, but I couldn't. But yeah, so how did I get on that? My phone is probably going to overheat soon. Guess I will go for the rest in another video. I'll probably do a part 2 of this. Maybe. Also, maybe I won't even post this. I didn't say anything. Talked for over an hour and said nothing.